listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Fredrick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, I'm Fred Long. I want to welcome you to GrammarPoint. We're looking at nouns. And the last session we looked at nominative case, and now we're going to be looking at the genitive case. And I'm going to screen share from my Kine Greek grammar, and you can see here an overview on page 69 of the 5-case system. So you have vocative case, nominative case, genitive case, dative case, and accusative case. And we're going to talk about the genitive case today. We've already talked about the endings and formation. So here we're going to be talking about its basic meaning and use. And so the genitive case is a case of description and often of possession. Now, this possession can also be particularized in terms of relationship. So once you kind of walk around the different ways that the genitive case is used, grammarians have started to create like labels or categories that are descriptive of the uses that are observed. And so there is a genitive of possession, but then there's a more specific genitive of relationship. So we'll look at some of these uses in just a moment. The genitive case also is a case of separation from. And this is seen particularly with prepositions like maybe ek or apo particularly, separation and source. And so there's kind of like a movement away. Historically in the language, this is associated with the ablative case, So if you go to the origin of the Greek language, the Indo-European and Proto-Indo-European and related languages, there was an 8-case system. And there's a case kind of function or use that became consolidated with the genitive case. And really this happens also with the dative. And this is why those two cases are really dynamic, is because they are the genitive case form really is doing the duty historically found of two cases, the genitive and the ablative. Now, Latin retains some ablative forms, so some of you might be familiar with the ablative sense, but really all this can be simplified just to say that the genitive case kind of works in two broad categories: description, possession, and separation. So we're going to look at special uses of the genitive case. And so there is a discussion I have in Kine Greek grammar where I consolidate some of these categories. And so some of the major uses, apart from obviously like the appositional genitive, like you can put any noun, if there's a noun that's you want to further define or qualify, and that noun happens to be a genitive, you're going to abut another noun to it, and it's going to need to agree. So that's kind of a default understanding that you can have what are called genitives of apposition. But there is also a particular use of genitive of apposition when the head noun is not the genitive case. And so the noun and the genitive is further qualifying it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're looking at the list here. One of the most basic uses of the genitive, and we see it all the time, is that the noun in the genitive case represents the one who is owning or possessing the head noun. So you have in Acts 20:28, tein ecclesian tou theou, the church of God. This is God's church. It's the church that's belonging to God. Another use is, and we could expand that out to relationships. So you could say the wife of somebody, or somebody like Mary of Joseph. And so you can use the genitive to indicate a family relationship. And here you have the wife of Philip. Attributive genitive is when the genitive noun So you have the genitive noun, and then you have the head noun. The genitive in this case is functioning to qualify the noun in terms of like an attribute. And so this is a use, for example, in Romans 6:6, you have to soma tes amartias, the body of the sin. Well, what this really means is that sin is somehow characterizing the body. So the body characterized by sin. So if you can take the genitive noun and turn it into an attribute and make sense of the translation, then you're probably looking at what's called an attributive genitive. Now, the subjective genitive is another category, and this is when the genitive noun is like the subject, the originator from which the head noun comes. So you have the love of Christ. If that's a subjective genitive, it means Christ's love for us. But of course, there can be some debate because there is another genitive use, which is called the objective genitive. And that's where the genitive noun is like the direct object of the head noun idea. So in this case, this might be our love for Christ, our loving Christ, in which case Christ would be the objective genitive because it's functioning like the direct object of the verbal idea of the head noun. So there's some debate with some of these between subjective genitive. Is the genitive noun like the agent performing the head noun idea, or is it objective genitive in receiving that action or being transferred in that action? So another good example of an objective genitive is in Acts 2:42. Te klasi tu artu, the breaking of bread. Here, obviously, the bread is the object of the verbal idea of breaking. Another use is called the attributed genitive. And this is when the head noun of the genitive noun is the verbal attribute, or is the attribute, like the adjectival attribute. So an example from Romans 6:4, Paul talks about you walking in newness of life. And the newness is the head noun, and then of life is the genitive. What is signified by that is that you're walking in a new life, the new life. So that's called an attributed genitive. There is a genitive of direct object. This is kind of an easy one because you've learned that already, that certain verbs take the genitive as the direct object, verbs of ruling, but you have other verbs like hearing, akuo, can take the genitive as its direct object. The partitive genitive is kind of a fun one where the genitive noun represents the broader class of which the head noun is one member or part. So you have one of the teachers. So one of the teachers. Of the teachers is the broader class. The one is the head noun one member of that broader group. So many from the Jews, or many of the Judeans. The Judeans is the larger group, the genitive noun, of which the head noun is the part. The genitive is used in comparative constructions, greater than constructions. So if you have an adjective that's put into the comparative degree, better of somebody, better than somebody, you use the genitive case for that. We did talk about the appositional genitive, and there is a slight distinction in that it's one thing to abut two genitive nouns together, and the second one is pretty much defining the first one. But if you have a genitive noun that's modifying another case noun, the genitive of apposition typically states, quoting from Wallace here, a specific example of the part of the larger category named in the head noun. So in this case, the genitive noun that's in apposition is a smaller specific example of the broader class, which is found in the head noun. You also have genitive of content. So you might have a net of fish. So the genitive is given the content of what the net has in this case. So treasures of wisdom and knowledge. In other words, what are in the treasure chests? Well, wisdom and knowledge. Well, the genitive case is very dynamic. We could have talked about genitive of time as well. Genitive of time is consistent with the meaning of the time, and that is of the genitive case, and that is a quality of time. Quality of time. So genitive of time is stressing the description, the quality of time, and usually it's like, for example, Nicodemus came to Jesus in the night or at night. Well, in the Greek, it's nuktos, which is a third declension genitive noun, and the NASB translates that well. Came by night. What's being stressed there is the quality of the kind of time at which Nicodemus came, and it's by night. He didn't come at night, but in the night atmosphere, and that's when he came. And this is different than the dative of time, which is point at which, and the accusative of time, like, so Jesus is raised at the third day, on the third day. That's like a very specific point at which. And then the accusative time is of extension. And so we're going to be looking at the dative and accusative next, but the accusative extension of time stresses duration, extension over a period of time. Well, that's just a little introduction to the genitive case, a quick overview of some of the major uses, and I hope you found that helpful.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.